Juvenal, Satire VII. On Caesar alone hang all the hopes and prospects of the learned. He alone in these days of ours has cast a favoring glance upon the sorrowing muses, at a time when poets of name and fame thought of hiring baths at Gabii, or bakehouses in Rome, while others felt no shame in becoming public criers, and starving Clio herself, bidding adieu to the vales of Aganippe, was flitting to the auction rooms. For if you see no prospect of earning a groat within the Muses' grove, you had better put up with Machaera's name and profits and join in the battle of the sale-room, selling to the crowd wine jars, tripods, bookcases, and cupboards, the Alcithoe of Pacius, the Thebes, or the Tereus of Faustus. How much better that than to say before a judge, "I saw what you did not see." Leave that to the knights of Asia, of Bithynia, of Cappadocia, gentry that were imported barefooted from New Gaul. But from this day forth no man who weaves the tuneful web of song and has bitten Apollo's laurel will be compelled to endure toil unworthy of his craft. To your task, young men. Your prince is looking around and goading you on, seeking objects for his favor. If you expect patronage from any other quarter, and in that hope are filling up the parchment of your saffron tablet, you had better order faggots at once, Telesinus, and present your productions to the spouse of Venus, or else put away your tomes, and let bookworms bore holes in them where they lie. Break your pen, poor wretch, destroy the battles that have robbed you of your sleep, you that are inditing lofty strains in a tiny garret, that you may come forth worthy of a scraggy bust wreathed with ivy. No hope have you beyond that. Your rich miser has now learnt only to admire, only to commend the eloquent, just as boys admire the bird of Juno. Meantime, the years flow by that could have endured the sea, the helmet, or the spade. The soul becomes wearied, and an eloquent but penniless old age curses itself and its own terpsichore. And now learn the devices by which the patron for whose favor you desert the temples of the Muses, and Apollo seeks to avoid spending anything on you. He writes verses of his own, yielding the palm to none but Homer, and that only because of his 1,000 years. If the sweets of fame fire you to give a recitation, he puts at your disposal a tumble-down house in some distant quarter. He knows how to supply you, avid freedmen, to sit at the ends of the rows, and how to distribute about the room the stalwart voices of his retainers. But none of your great men will give you as much as will pay for the benches, or for the tiers of seats resting on hired beams, or for the chairs in the front rows, which will have to be returned when done with. Yet, for all that, we poets stick to our task. We go on drawing furrows in the thin soil and turning up the shore with unprofitable plough. For if you would give it up, the itch for writing and making a name holds you fast as with a noose, and becomes inveterate in your distempered brain. But your real poet, who has a vein of genius all his own, one who spins no hackneyed lays, and whose pieces are struck from no common mint, such an one as I cannot point to, and only feel is the product of a soul free from care, that knows no bitterness, that loves the woodlands, and is fitted to drink at the Muses' spring. For how can unhappy poverty sing songs in the Piraean cave, and grasp the thyrsus when it is short of cash, which the body has need of both by night and day? Horace's stomach was well filled when he shouted his cry of Evoe. Where can genius find a place except in a heart stirred by song alone, that shuts out every thought but one, and is swept along by the lords of Kira and of Nissa? It needs a lofty soul, not one that is dismayed at the cost of a coverlet, to have visions of chariots and horses and gods' faces, or to tell with what a mien the Fury confounded the Rutulian. Had Virgil possessed no slave, and no decent roof over his head, all the snakes would have fallen from the Fury's hair. No dread note would have boomed from her voiceless trumpet. Do we expect Rubrenus Lappa to be as great in the buskin as the ancients, when his Atreus has to be pawned for his cloak and crockery? Numitor, poor man, has nothing to give to a needy friend, though he is rich enough to send presents to his mistress, and he had enough, too, to buy a tamed lion that needed masses of meat for his keep. It cost less, no doubt, to keep a lion than a poet. The poet's belly is more capacious. Lucan, indeed, reclining amid the statues of his gardens, may be content with fame, but what will ever so much glory bring into Serranus, or to the starving Salius, if it be glory only, when Statius has gladdened the city by promising a day, people flock to hear his pleasing voice, and his loved Thebais, so charmed are their souls by his sweetness, with such rapture does the multitude listen to him. But when his verses have brought down the house, poor Statius will starve if he does not sell his virgin Agave to Paris, for it is Paris who appoints men to military councils, it is Paris who puts the golden ring round the poet's finger after 6 months' service. You can get from a stage player what no great man will give you. Why frequent the spacious antechambers of the Berai or the Camerini? It is Pelopeia that appoints our prefects, and Philomela our tribunes. Yet you need not begrudge the bard who gains his living from the playhouse, who nowadays will be Maecenas to you, and Proculius or a Fabius, who another Cotta or a second Lentulus. Genius in those days met with its due reward. Many then found their profit in pale cheeks and in abjuring potations all through December. And is your labor more remunerative, ye writers of history? More time, more oil is wasted here, regardless of all limit. The pages run up to thousands. The pile of paper is ever mounting to your ruin. So ordains the vast array of facts and the rules of the craft. But what harvest will you gather? What fruit from the tilling of your land? Who will give to an historian as much as he gives to the man who reads out the news? Oh, but historians are a lazy crew that delight in lounging and the shade. Tell me, then, what do pleaders get for their services in the courts, and for those huge bundles of papers which they bring with them? They talk big enough, especially if a creditor of their own happens to be listening, or if, more urgent still, they get poked in the ribs by one who has brought a huge ledger to claim a doubtful debt. Then indeed do their capacious bellows pant forth prodigious lies, then are their breasts beslobbered, and yet, if you want to discover their real gains, you may put on one side the fortunes of 100 lawyers, and on the other that of a single jockey of the red. The great men are seated, you rise, a pale-faced Ajax, to declaim before a bumpkin judge in a case of contested liberty. Strain your lungs, poor fool, until they burst. Then, when exhausted by your labors, some green palm branches may be put up to adorn your garret. What fee will your voice bring in? A dried-up ham? A jar of sprats? Some veteran onions which would serve as rations for a Moor? Or 5 flagons of wine that has sailed down the Tiber? If you have pled on 4 occasions, and been lucky enough to get a gold piece, a bit of it, as part of the compact, will go to the attorney. Emilius will get the maximum legal fee, though he did not plead so well as we did, but then he has a bronze chariot in his forecourt, with 4 stately steeds, and an effigy of himself seated on a gallant charger, brandishing from afar a bending spear, and practising for battle with one eye closed. That is how Pedo becomes bankrupt, and how Matho fails, and such will be the end of Tongilius, who frequents the baths with a huge oil flask of rhinoceros horn, and distributes the bathers with a mob of dirty retainers. His Median bearers are weighed down by the long poles of his litter as he passes through the forum on his way to buy slaves or plate, agate vases or country houses. For that foreign robe of his, with its Tyrian purple, gains him credit. These gentlemen get profit out of this display. The purple or the violet robe brings practice to a lawyer. It pays him to live with a racket and an appearance beyond his means, and wasteful Rome sets no limits to extravagance. Trust in eloquence, indeed? Why, no one would give Cicero himself 200 pence nowadays, unless a huge ring were blazing on his finger. The first thing that a litigant looks to is, have you 8 slaves and a dozen retainers? Have you a litter to wait on you, and gowned citizens to walk before you? That is why Paulus used to hire a sardonyx ring, and that is why he earned a higher fee than Gallus or Bacillus. When is eloquence ever found beneath a shabby coat? When does Bacillus get the chance of producing in court a weeping mother? Who would listen to him, however well he spoke? Better go to Gaul, or to Africa, that nursing mother of lawyers, if you would make a living by your tongue. Or do you teach rhetoric, O Vettius? What iron bowels you must have when your troop of scholars slays the cruel tyrant, when each in turn stands up and repeats what he has just been conning in his seat, reciting the self-same things in the self-same verses, served up again and again. The cabbage is the death of the unhappy master. What complexion should be put on the case? Within what category it falls? What is the crucial point? What hits will be made on the other side? These are the things which everyone wants to know, but for which no one is willing to pay. Pay, indeed? Why, what have I learnt? Asks the scholar. It is the teacher's fault, of course, that the Arcadian youth feels no flutter in his left breast when he dins his dire Hannibal into my unfortunate head every 6th day of the week. Whatever be the question which he is pondering, whether he should make straight for the city from the field of Cannae, or whether after the rain and thunder he should lead around his cohorts all dripping after the storm. Name any sum you please, and you shall have it. What would I give that the lad's father might listen to him as often as I do? So cry 6 or more of our sophists in one breath, entering upon real lawsuits of their own. abandoning the ravisher and forgetting all about the poisoner or the wicked and thankless husband, or the drugs that restore sight to the chronic blind. And so, if my counsel goes for anything, I would advise the man who comes down from his rhetorical shade to fight for a sum that would buy a trumpery corn ticket, for that's the most handsome fee he will ever get, to present himself with a discharge, and enter upon some other walk of life. If you ask what fees Chrysogonus and Pollio get for teaching music to the sons of our great men, you will tear up the rhetoric of Theodorus. Your great man will spend 600,000 sesterces upon his baths, and something more on the colonnade in which he is to drive on rainy days. What? Is he to wait for a clear sky and bespatter his horses with fresh mud? How much better to drive where the hoofs will remain bright and spotless. Elsewhere, let a banqueting hall arise, supported on lofty pillars of African marble to catch the winter sun. And cost the house what it may, there will come a man to arrange the courses skilfully, and the man who makes up the tasty dishes. Amidst expenditure such as this, 2,000 sesterces will be enough, and more than enough for Quintilian. There is nothing on which a father will not spend more money than on his son. How then, you ask, does Quintilian possess these vast domains? Pass by cases of rare good fortune. The lucky man is both beautiful and brave. He is wise and noble and high-born. He sews on to his black shoe the crescent of the senator. He is a great orator, too, a good javelin man, and if he chance to have caught a cold, he sings divinely. For it makes all the difference by what stars you are welcomed when you utter your first cry, and are still red from your mother's womb. If fortune so choose, you will become a consul from being a rhetor. If again she so wills, you will become a rhetor from being a consul. What of Ventidius and Tullius? What made their fortunes but the stars and the wondrous potency of secret fate? The fates will give kingdoms to a slave, and triumphs to a captive. Nevertheless, that fortunate man is rare, rarer than a white crow. Many have repented them of the professor's vain and unprofitable chair. Witness the ends of Thrasymachus and Secundus Carinus. Him too didst thou see in poverty, on whom thou, O Athens, hadst nothing better to bestow than a cup of cold hemlock. Grant, O gods, that the earth may lie soft and light upon the shades of our forefathers. May the sweet-scented crocus and a perpetual springtime bloom over their ashes, who deemed that the teacher should hold the place of a reverend parent. Achilles trembled for fear of the rod when already at full age, singing songs in his native hills. Nor would he then have dared to laugh at the tale of his musical instructor. But Rufus and the rest are cudgelled each by his own pupils, that Rufus whom they have so often styled the Allobrogian Cicero, who pours into the lap of Calidus or of the learned Palemon as much as their grammatical labours deserve, and yet, small as the fee is, and it is smaller than the rhetor's wage, the pupil's unfeeling attendant nibbles off a bit of it for himself. So too does the steward. But never mind, Palemon, suffer some diminution of your wage, like the hawker who sells rags and white Gallic blankets for winter wear. If only it do not go for nothing that you have sat from early dawn in a hole which no blacksmith would put up with, no workman who teaches how to card wool with slanting tool, that it do not go for nothing to have snuffed up the odor of as many lamps as you had scholars in your class thumbing a discolored Horace or a begrimed Virgil. But it is seldom that the fee can be recovered without a judgment of the court. And yet, be sure, ye parents, to impose the strictest laws upon the teacher. He must never be at fault in his grammar. If he know all history and have all the authorities at his fingertips, if asked a chance question on his way to the baths or to the establishment of Phoebus, he must at once tell you who was the nurse of Anchises, what was the name of the birthplace of Anchemolus, stepmother to what age Acestus lived, how many flagons of Sicilian wine he presented to the Trojans. Require of him that he shall mold the young minds as a man molds a face out of wax with his thumb. Insist that he shall be a father to the whole brood, so they shall play no nasty game and do no nasty trick. No easy matter to watch the hands and sparkling eyes of so many youngsters. See to all this, you say, and then, when the year comes round, receive the golden piece which the mob demands for a winning jockey. Satire VIII. What avail your pedigrees? What boots it, Ponticus, to be valued for one's ancient blood, and to display the painted visages of one's forefathers? An Aemilianus standing in his car, a half-crumbled Curius, a Corvinus who has lost a shoulder, or a Galba that has neither ear nor nose. Of what profit is it to boast a Fabius on your ample family chart, and thereafter to trace kinship through many a branch with grimy dictators and masters of the horse, if in presence of the Lepidi you live an evil life? What signify all these effigies of warriors if you gamble all night long before your Numantine ancestors, and begin your sleep with the rise of Lucifer at an hour when our generals of old would be moving their standards and their camps? Why should a Fabius, born in the home of Hercules, take pride in the title Allobrogicus in the great altar if he be covetous and empty-headed and more effeminate than a Euganian lambkin, if his loins, rubbed smooth by Catanian pumice, throw shame on his shaggy-haired grandfathers, or if as a trafficker in poison he dishonor his unhappy race by a statue that will have to be broken in pieces? Though you deck your hall from end to end with ancient waxen images, virtue is the one and only true nobility. Be a Paulus, or a Cossus, or a Drusus in character. Rank them before the statues of your ancestors. Let them precede the fasces themselves, when you are a consul. You owe me, first of all things, the virtues of the soul. Prove yourself stainless in life, one who holds fast to the right both in word and deed, and I acknowledge you as a lord. All hail to you, Gaetulicus, or you, Silanus, or from whatever stock you came, if you have proved yourself to a rejoicing country a rare and illustrious citizen. We would fain cry what Egypt shouts when Osiris has been found. For who can be called noble who is unworthy of his race, and is distinguished in nothing but his name. We call someone's dwarf an Atlas, his blackamoor a swan, an ill-favored, misshapen girl we call Europa. Lazy hounds that are bald with chronic mange and who lick the edges of a dry lamp will bear the names of pard, tiger, lion, or of any other animal in the world that roars more fiercely. Take your care that it be not on that principle that you are a Creticus or a Camerinus. Who is it whom I admonish thus? It is you, Rubellius Blandus, that I speak. You are puffed up with the lofty pedigree of the Drusi, as though you had done something to make you noble, and to be conceived by one glorying into the blood of Iulus, rather than by one who weaves for hire under the windy rampart. You others are dirt, you say, the very scum of our populace. Not one of you can point to his father's birthplace, but I am one of the Cecropidae. Long life to you. May you long enjoy the glories of your birth. And yet, among the lowest rabble you will find a Roman who has eloquence, one who will plead the cause of the unlettered noble. You must go to the toga-clad herd for a man to untie the knots and riddles of the law. From them will come the brave young soldier who marches to the Euphrates, or to the eagles that guard the conquered Batavians, while you are nothing but a Cecropid, the image of a limbless Hermes. For in no respect but one have you the advantage over him. His head is of marble, while yours is a living effigy. Tell me, thou scion of the Trojans, who deems a dumb animal well born unless it be strong? It is for this that we commend the swift horse whose speed sets every hand aglow, and fills the circus with the hoarse shouts of victory. That horse is noblest, on whatever pasture reared, whose rush outstrips the rest, and whose dust is foremost upon the plain. But the offspring of Coryphaeus or Hirpinus comes to the hammer, if victory light but seldom on his car. No respect is there paid to ancestors, no favor is shown to shades. The slow of foot, that are fit only to turn a miller's wheel, pass for a mere nothing from one owner to another, and gall their necks against the collar. So if I am to respect yourself, and not your belongings, give me something of your own to engrave among your titles, in addition to those honors which we pay and have paid to those to whom you owe your all. Enough this for the youth, whom report has handed down to us as proud and puffed up with his kinship to Nero, for in those high places regard for others is rarely to be found. But for you, Ponticus, I cannot wish that you should be valued for the glories of your race, while doing nothing that shall bring you praise in the days to come. It is a poor thing to lean upon the fame of others, lest the pillars give way and the house fall down in ruin. The vine shoot, trailing upon the ground, longs for the widowed elm. Be a stout soldier, a faithful guardian, and an incorruptible judge. If summoned to bear witness in some dubious and uncertain cause, though Philaris himself should bring up his bull and dictate to you a perjury, count it the greatest of all sins to prefer life to honor, and to lose, for the sake of living, all that makes life worth having. The man who merits death is already dead, though he dine off 100 lucrine oysters, and bathe in a whole cauldron of cosmos essences. When you enter your long-expected province as its governor, set a curb and a limit to your passion, and also to your greed, and have compassion on the impoverished provincials, whose very bones have been sucked dry of the marrow. Have regard to what the law ordains, what the Senate enjoins. Consider what honors await the good ruler. With what a just thunderstroke the Senate hurled down Capito and Numitor, those plunderers of the Cilicians. Yet what profit was there from their condemnation? Look out for an auctioneer, Carippus, to sell your chattel, seeing that Panza has stripped you of all that Natta left, and hold your tongue about it when all else is gone. It is madness to throw away your passage money. Very different in days of old were the wailings of our allies, and the harm inflicted on them by losses, when they had been newly conquered and were wealthy still. Their houses then were all well stored. They had piles of money with Spartan mantles and Coan purples. Beside the paintings of Parrhasius and the statues of Myron stood the living ivories of Phidias. Everywhere the works of Polycletus were to be seen. Few tables were without a mentor. But after that came now a Dolabella, now an Antonius, and now a sacrilegious Verus, loading big ships with secret spoils, peace trophies more numerous than those of war. Nowadays, on capturing a farm, you may rob our allies of a few yoke of oxen, or a few mares, with the sire of a herd, or of the household gods themselves, if there be a good statue left, or a single deity in his little shrine. Such are the best and choicest things to be got now. You despise, perchance, and deservedly, the unwarlike Rhodian and the scented Corinthian. What harm will their resined youths do you, or the smooth legs of the entire breed? But keep clear of rugged Spain, avoid the land of Gaul and the Dalmatian shore. Spare too those harvesters who fill the belly of a city that has no leisure save for the circus and the play. What great profit can you reap from outrages upon Libyans, seeing that Marius has so lately stripped Africa to the skin? Beware above all things to do no wrong to men, who are at once brave and miserable. You may take from them all the gold and silver that they have, but plundered though they be, they will still have their arms. They will still have their shields and their swords, their javelins and helmets. What I have just propounded is no mere theme. It is the truth. You may take it that I am reading out to you one of the Sibyl's leaves. If your whole staff be incorruptible, if no long-haired Ganymede sells your judgments, if your wife be blameless, if in your circuit through the towns and districts there is no harpy ready to pounce with crooked talons upon gold, then you may trace back your race to Picus. If you delight in lofty names, you may count the whole array of Titans and Prometheus himself among your ancestors, and select for yourself a great-grandfather from whatever myth you please. But if you are carried away headlong by ambition and by lust, if you break your rods upon the bleeding backs of our allies, if you love to see your axes blunted and your headsmen weary, then the nobility of your own parents begins to rise up in judgment against you, and to hold a glaring torch over your misdeeds. The greater the sinner's name, the more signal the guiltiness of the sin. If you are wont to put your signature to forged deeds, what matters it to me that you sign them in temples built by your grandfather, or in front of the triumphal statue of your father. What does that matter? If you steal out at night for adultery, your brow concealed under a cowl of Gallic wool. The bloated Lateranus whirls past the bones and ashes of his ancestors in a rapid car. With his own hands, this muleteer consul locks the wheel with the drag. It is by night indeed, but the moon looks on. The stars strain their eyes to see. When his time of office is over, Lateranus will take up his whip in broad daylight. Not shrinking to meet a now aged friend, he will be the first to salute him with his whip. He will unbind the tresses of hay and deal out the fodder to his weary cattle. Meanwhile, though he slays woolly victims and tawny steers after Numa's fashion, he swears by no other deity before Jove's high altar than the goddess of horseflesh, and the images painted on the reeking stables. And when it pleases him to go back to the all-night tavern, a Syro-Phoenician runs forth to meet him, a denizen of the Idumean gate perpetually drenched in perfumes, and salutes him as lord and prince with all the airs of a host. And with him comes Cayenne, her dress tucked up, carrying a flagon of wine for sale. An apologist will say to me, "We too did the same as boys." Perhaps, but then you ceased from your follies and let them drop. Let your evil days be short. Let some of your misdoings be cut off with your first beard. Boys may be pardoned, but when Lateranus frequented those hot liquor shops with their inscribed linen awnings, he was of ripe age, fit to guard in arms the Armenian and Syrian rivers, the Danube and the Rhine, fit to protect the person of his emperor. Send your legate to Ostia, O Caesar, but search for him in some big cook-shop. There you will find him, lying cheek by jowl beside a cutthroat, in the company of bargees, thieves, and runaway slaves, beside hangmen and coffin-makers, or some such eunuch priest lying drunk with idle timbrels. Here is Liberty Hall. One cup serves for everybody. No one has a bed to himself, nor a table apart from the rest. What would you do, friend Ponticus, if you chanced upon a slave like this? You would send him to your Lucanian or Tuscan bridewell. But you, gentlemen of Trojan blood, find excuses for yourselves. What would disgrace a huckster sits gracefully on a Volusus or a Brutus. What if I can never cite any example so foul and shameful that there is not something worse behind? Your means exhausted, Damasippus, you hired out your voice to the stage, taking the part of the clamorous ghost of Catullus. The nimble Lentulus acted famously the part of Laureolus, deserving in my judgment to be really and truly crucified. Nor can the spectators themselves be forgiven. The populace, that with brazen front sits and beholds the triple buffooneries of our patricians, that can listen to a barefooted Fabius and laugh to see the Mamerci cuffing each other. What matters it at what price they sell their deaths? No Nero compels them to sell, yet they hesitate not to sell themselves at the games of the exalted praetor. And yet, suppose that on one side, if you were placed a sword, on the other the stage, which were the better choice? Was ever any man so afraid of death that he would choose to be the jealous husband of a Thymele, or the colleague of the clown Corinthus? Yet, when an emperor has taken to harp playing, It is not so very strange that a noble should act in a mime. Beyond this, what will be left but the gladiatorial school? And that scandal, too, you have seen in our city. A Gracchus fighting, not indeed as a Murmillo, nor with the round shield and scimitar. Such accoutrements he rejects, aye, rejects and detests, nor does a helmet shroud his face. See how he wields his trident, and when poised right hand he has cast the trailing net in vain, he lifts up his bare face to the benches and flies, for all to recognize, from one end of the arena to the other. We cannot mistake the golden tunic that flutters from his throat, and the twisted cord that dangles from the high-crowned cap. And so the pursuer, who was pitted against Gracchus, endured a shame more grievous than any wound. If free suffrage were granted to the people, who would be so abandoned as not to prefer Seneca to Nero? Nero, for whose chastisement no single ape or adder, no solitary sack should have been provided, his crime was like that of Agamemnon's son, but the case was not the same, seeing that Orestes, at the bidding of the gods, was avenging a father slain in his cups. Orestes never stained himself with Electra's blood, or with that of his Spartan wife. He never mixed poison draughts for his own kin. He never sang upon the stage. He never wrote an epic upon Troy. For of all the deeds of Nero's cruel and bloody tyranny, which was there that more deserved to be avenged by the arms of a Verginius, of a Vindex, or a Galba? These were the deeds, these the graces of our high-born prince, whose delight it was to prostitute himself by unseemly singing upon a foreign stage, and to earn a chaplet of Greek parsley. Let thy ancestral images be decked with the trophies of thy voice. Place thou at the feet of a Domitius the trailing robes of Thyestes, or Antigone, or the mask of Melipona, and hang up thy harp on a colossus of marble. Where can be found, O Catiline, nobler ancestors than thine, or than thine, Cathegus? Yet you plot a night attack. You prepare to give our houses and temples to the flames, as though you were sons of trousered Gauls, or sprung from the Senones, daring deeds that deserve the shirt of torture. But our consul is awake and beats back your hosts. Born at Arpinum, of ignoble blood, a municipal knight new to Rome, he posts helmeted men at every point to guard the affrighted citizens, and is alert on every hill. Thus within the walls his toga won for him as much name and honor as Octavius gained by battle in Lucus, as much as Octavian won by his blood-dripping sword on the plains of Thessaly. But then Rome was yet free when she styled him the parent and father of his country. Another son of Arpinum used to work for hire upon the Volscian hills, toiling behind a plough not his own. After that, a centurion's knotty staff would be broken over his head, if his pick were slow and sluggish in the trench. Yet it is he who faces the Cimbri, and the mightiest perils alone he saves the trembling city. And so, when the ravens, who had never before seen such huge carcasses, flew down upon the slaughtered Cimbri, his high-born colleague is decorated with the second bay. Plebeian were the souls of the Decii, plebeian were their names, yet they were accepted by the gods beneath and by Mother Earth in lieu of all the legions and the allies, and all the youth of Latium, for the Decii were more precious than the hosts whom they saved. It was one born of a slave who won the robe and diadem and fasces of Quirinus, the last he of our good kings, whereas the consul's own sons, who should have dared some great thing for endangered liberty, some deed to be marvelled at by Mucius or Cocles, or by the maiden who swam across the river boundary of our realm, were for traitorously loosing the bolts of the city gates to the exiled tyrants. It was a slave, well worthy he to be bewailed by matrons, who revealed the secret plot to the fathers, while the sons met their just punishment from scourging and from the axe, then first used in the cause of law. I would rather that Thersites were your father, if only you were like the grandson of Aeacus, and could wield the arms of Vulcan, than that you should have been begotten by Achilles and be like Thersites. Yet, after all, however far you may trace back your name, however long the roll, you derive your race from an ill-famed asylum. The first of your ancestors, whoever he was either a shepherd or something that I would rather not name. Satire IX. I should like to know, Nevolus, why you so often look gloomy when I meet you, knitting your brow like a vanquished Marsyas. What have you to do with the look that Ravela wore when caught playing that dirty trick with Rhodope? If a slave takes a lick at the pastry, he gets a thrashing for his pains. Why do you look as woe-begone as Creperius Pollio when he goes round offering a triple rate of interest and can find no fool to trust him? Why have you suddenly developed those wrinkles? You used to be an easily contented person who passed as a home-bred knight that could make biting jests at the dinner table and tell witty town-bred stories. But now you are a different man. You have a hang-dog look. Your head is a forest of unkept, unanointed hair. Your skin has lost all the gloss that it got from swaths of hot Brudian pitch, and your legs are dirty and rough with sprouting hair. Why are you as thin as a chronic invalid, in whom a quartan fever has long made its home? One can detect in a sickly body the secret torments of the soul, and also its joys. The face takes on the stamp of either. You seem, therefore, to have changed your mode of life, and to be going in a way opposite of your past. Not long ago, as I remember, you were a gallant, more notorious than Aufidius. You used to frequent the temple of Isis, and that of Peace, with its Ganymede, and the secret courts of the foreign mother. For in what temple are there not frail fair ones to be found? Many men have found profit in my mode of life, but I have made nothing substantial out of my labours. I sometimes have a greasy cloak given me that will save my toga, a coarse and crudely dyed garment that has been ill-combed by the Gallic weaver, or some trifle in silver of an inferior quality. Man is ruled by destiny, even those parts of him that lie beneath his clothes. What greater monster is there in the world than a miserly debauchee? I gave you this, says he, and then that, and later again ever so much more. Thus he makes a reckoning with his lusts. Well, set out the counters, call in the lads with the reckoning board, count out 5,000 sesterces all told, and then enumerate my services. I am less accounted of than the poor hind who ploughs his master's field. You used to deem yourself a delicate and good-looking youth, fit to be Jove's own cupbearer. But will men like you, who are unwilling to pay for your own morbid pleasures, ever show a kindness to a poor follower or a slave? A pretty fellow to have presents sent him of green sunshades or big amber balls on a birthday, or on the first day of the showery spring when he lolls at full length in a huge easy chair counting over the secret gifts he has received upon the matron's day. Tell me, you sparrow, for whose benefit are you keeping all those hills and farms in Apulia, all those pasture lands that tire out the kites? Your stores are filled with rich grapes from your Trifoline vineyard, or from the slopes that look down from Cumae, or the unpeopled Garrus, whose vats seal up more vintages destined for long life than yours. Would it be a great matter to present a few acres to the loins of an exhausted client? Is it better, think you, that this countrywoman, with her cottage and her babe and her pet dog, should be bequeathed to a friend who plays the timbrels? You are an impudent beggar, you say. Yes, but my rent cries on me to beg. And so does my single slave lad, as single as that big eye of Polyphemus, which helped the wily Ulysses to make his escape. And one slave is not enough. I shall have to buy a second and feed them both. What shall I do, pray, when the winter howls? What shall I say to their shivering feet and shoulders when December's north wind blows? Shall I say, hold on and wait till the grasshoppers arrive? And though you ignore and pass by my other services, what price do you put on this, that were I not your true and devoted client, your wife would still be a maid? You know how often and in what ways you have asked that service of me, and what promises you made to me. There's many a household in which a union that was unstable, ready to break up, and all but dissolved, has been saved by the intervention of a lover. Which way can you turn? Which service do you put first? Which last? Is it to be no merit, you thankless and perfidious man, none at all, that I have presented you with a little son or daughter? For you to rear children, and love to spread abroad in the Gazette the proofs of your virility, hang up garlands over the door, you are now a father. I have given you something to set up against ill fame. You have now parental rights. Through me you can be entreated as an heir, and receive a legacy entire, with a nice little extra in the bargain, to all which perquisites many more will be added if I make up your family to the full number of 3. Indeed, Knavolus, you have just cause of complaint. But what has he got to say on the other side? He takes no notice, and looks out for another 2-legged donkey like myself. But remember, my secrets are for your ears alone. Keep my complaints fast locked up in your own bosom. It is a fatal thing to have for your enemy a man who keeps himself smooth by pumice stone. The man who has lately entrusted me with a secret has a consuming hatred of me, believing I have revealed everything that I know. He will not hesitate to take up a sword, or to lay open my head with a club, or to put a lighted candle against my door. Nor can you disregard or make nothing of the fact that for a man of his means the price of poison is never high. So keep my secrets close as did the Council of Areopagus. Oh, my poor Cordion, do you suppose that a rich man has any secrets? Though his slaves hold their tongues, his beasts of burden and his dog will talk, his doorpost and his marble columns will tell tales. Let him shut the windows and close every chink with curtains. Let him fasten the doors, remove the light, turn everyone out of his house, and permit no one to sleep in it. Yet the tavern keeper close by will know before dawn what he was doing at the second cockcrow. He will hear also all the tales invented by the pastrymen, by the head cook and the carver. For what calumny will they hesitate to concoct against their masters when a slander will avenge them for their strappings? Nor will some tippling friend be wanting to look for you at the crossways, and do what you will, pour his drunken story into your ear. So just ask those people to hold their tongues about the things which you questioned me about just now. Why, they would rather blab out a secret than drink as much stolen wine as Sophia used to swill when conducting a public sacrifice. There are many reasons for right living, but the chiefest of them all is this, that you need pay no attention to the talk of your slaves. For the tongue is the worst part of a bad slave, and yet worse still is the plight of a man who cannot escape from the talk of those whom he supports with his own bread and money. Your advice is excellent, but it is vague. What do you advise me to do now, after all my lost time and disappointed hopes? For the short span of our poor unhappy life is hurrying swiftly on, like a flower, to its close, while we drink and call for chaplets, for unguents, and for maidens. Old age is creeping up on us unperceived. Be not afraid. So long as these 7 hills of ours stand fast, pathic friends will never fail you. From every quarter, in carriages and in ships, those gentry who scratch their heads with one finger will flock in, and you have always a further and better ground of hope, if you fit your diet to your trade. Such maxims are for the fortunate. My Clothos and Lachesis are well pleased if I can fill my belly with my labours. O my own little Laris, whom I am wont to supplicate with a pinch of frankincense or corn, or with a tiny garland, when can I assure myself of what will keep my old age